Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and call to order the special called meeting of the Cobb County Board of Elections. This meeting is being called for the purposes of addressing 6 challenges to voter registration. I believe the young woman that submitted those is the challenger here. Your name, ma'am? Okay, thank you. Is it Miss Asda? Asda, got it. Make sure I pronounce that correctly. All right. And so she is, Miss Asta has presented all 6 challenges. At this point, I think we'll go ahead and turn it over to our attorney, Mr. Daniel White, and he will present the 6 challenges.
Thank you. Just as a reminder to the board, I know we have some board members who have done this in the past, and some, it may have been a while, or you've never done this before. So just a primer on how this process goes. This challenge, because it didn't, it was filed, there's 2 or 3 different ways to challenge, but the one that was cited by Ms. Asta here was under OCGA 21-229. And so under that, that gives a resident or another voter in the area the authority to challenge the qualifications of other voters on the registrar's list. And under that section, they have set out a very specific, narrow time frame and have narrowed it down even more after the last revision. And so we have followed that process where we have given, we have set the hearing within 10 days of receiving the notice, which was received on of the challenge, which was received on April 29th. We sent out notice within 10 days of that. The hearing was set within 10 days of the notice being set, but also giving each of the voters 3 days written notice at their last known address. And so that's the notice requirements. I just wanted to note that for the record that those things have all been sent out, and we confirmed with Janine and staff that all those had been, all that had been done within the correct time frame, and that the notice had been sent at least to the addresses we had on file. And then just so you know, for today, it says the burden shall be on the elector making the challenge to prove that the person being challenged is not qualified to remain on the list of electors. And this is different from 230. There's a sort of different process that might apply if someone was challenging someone who might have indicated they want a ballot or they want to vote in this election. This is 229. It's not necessarily related to this specific election. This is just saying they don't belong on the list at all, on the registrar's list, because they moved. And so we did follow up with Ms. Asta because the statute says that they have to say with specificity the grounds of their challenge, and she responded that she was challenging these 6 voters because it appears that they have moved out of state to the state of Alabama. And so today is her chance to meet that burden of proving to the board that these voters are not qualified. And we have other powers and authorities, but generally in the past, we've just sort of, the procedure reviews is to let the challenger present the case. And then the board may, after she's presented, may ask her questions. Then if there's, we can call and let anybody who's here to respond, give them an opportunity to respond. Then usually I think we'll hear from staff and hear what they had to say, and you can ask staff questions. And at the end, when it's time to deliberate, you can ask more questions of the challenger or the staff, and then you don't have to, but you are permitted, because it involves potential litigation, to call an executive session for potential litigation. But that's really only to discuss the legal issues related to that, and we don't want to stray too much outside of, we don't want to get into, well, what's the process overall on that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's just you could sort of deliberate and discuss the legal issues in executive session, and then whatever decision the board comes to would need to be made in open session, and notice would be sent after that. So that's the general process. So at this time, I apologize
for interrupting you.
Sure.
Just to be certain, and I know this was noted in the announcement or the placement of the agenda on the Cobb County website, but during this process, there is no public comment, and I just want to clarify with respect to questioning and the opportunity for anyone to speak that's present. That, I believe, is obviously the staff and the challenger. Is that correct?
Yes,
and any of these six
yes.
individuals to the extent that they are present.
The people who are entitled to speak at this meeting are the challenger, the folks who are here to respond to their status being challenged, and staff, yes.
Okay, I just want to clarify. Go ahead.
And I do want to, the board hasn't exercised this power, but you do have the power to issue subpoenas and call other witnesses in, and sometimes if we get bigger, like these long list challenges, that might be, something you want to think about in the future. And I know before we move directly to the hearing, there's been a discussion that at some point in a future board meeting, we may want to sort of adopt some written guidelines, almost like a zoning hearing, like the challenger's going to get 15 minutes, the other person's going to get, but we can talk about that at another meeting. But as these are becoming more common, as more people can sort of do their own research, it's worth going forward. But right now, we're going to try to stick to what we've done in the past. And then if you want to have a discussion at a future meeting about getting some rules in writing so everybody knows the expectations, we can do that. So
Okay.
At this time, Ms. Asta, if you would like to make your presentation to the board regarding your challenge to these 6 voters.
Good afternoon. My name is Carol Asta, and I live at 1048 Malibu Place, Marietta, in Cobb County. I'm here today to answer any questions the board may have about the voter challenges submitted to you on April 29, 2022, and about any of the subsequent documentation sent to the
I apologize for interrupting you, Ms. Asta. One of our board members has requested that you speak just a little louder.
Okay.
I don't know, do we have the ability to adjust her mic at all?
She's all the way up.
She's all the way up. Okay. Again, apologies for interrupting you.
Public speaking isn't my wheelhouse.
Understood.
I'm here today to answer any questions the board may have about the voter challenges submitted to you on April 29th, and about any of the subsequent documentation sent to the County Board Director of Elections and Registration prior to today's meeting. I understand each of the board members have been provided with hard copies of the information sent to Janine Everler regarding each of the 6 challenged Cobb County voters. It is my hope that the board will take swift action to ensure that the 6 challenged voters are removed from the Cobb County's rolls, as they no longer live in the state, yet have active voter registrations in both Alabama and Georgia.
And, Ms. Chair, I want to just, probably just for purposes of the record, I want to go ahead and confirm with the challenger that these are the names that she's challenging, and then if she has any additional information she would like to give at this time. The names we received in the April 29th challenge notice were Angela Bland Bacon, who used to reside at 3300 Windy Ridge Parkway, apartment 1413, Atlanta, Georgia, and now, according to the challenger, has a Dadeville, Alabama address. The second voter is Clara Josephine Thomas, who used to reside at 4248 Pentworth Lane, Kennesaw, Cobb County, Georgia, and now appears to have a Northport, Alabama address. Charlotte Bates Pollinger, who used to reside at 438, or as far as the challenger's notice says, is that her former address is 438 Lorien Way, Kennesaw, Georgia, and now has also has a Fairhope, Alabama address. Kara Cowan Scott, also known as Kara Dawn Scott, who has a Cobb address of 2761 Tarpley Place, Kennesaw, Georgia, and now also has a Dadeville, Alabama address. Bobby Lee Smitherman, who had an address of 5466 Vinings Lake Way in Mableton, Georgia, and now appears to have a Prattville, Alabama address, and then Colleen Faye Adams, who has an address on file of 1528 Monarch Drive, Marietta, Georgia, and now has a Huntsville, Alabama address.
Okay, thank you.
So at this point, if you have questions, do you have anything else to add to what's already
No,
been submitted?
I've submitted the copies of from the websites from the Secretary of State's in Georgia and Alabama, showing that they're active in both states.
And just so you guys, the folks who have been through and haven't been through, you are acting sort of as the fact finder here. And so you're welcome to ask her questions and try to find out where she got her information from. If you have legal questions, I can help you with that. That's what I'm here for. I can't necessarily give you, and depending on what the question is, I can give you my opinion, but you don't have to, you have to make both the fact decision and ultimately the decision about qualification or not. So I'll turn it over to the board if you have any questions for Ms. Asta.
Certainly. Just as a kind of a matter of housekeeping, I believe you made reference to the burden of proof, but if you'll restate that.
Yes.
As well as restate the location or the citation in the Georgia code.
Yes. So under OCGA 21-2-229, it's titled Challenge of an Applicant for Registration by Other Electors. Under subsection C, it says the burden shall be on the elector making the challenge to prove that the person being challenged is not qualified to remain on the list of electors. And when, we hear, if you've watched any courtroom dramas or been in the courtroom, you'll hear different burdens enunciated by the court, where there's more than a reasonable doubt, or more likely than not, or there's different standards for different things. And usually when there's not a specific burden, when it just says the burden is on this party or that party, it's a more likely than not standard. It's you're weighing it, and do the facts appear, to appear to show what's being alleged, and that it's not a reasonable doubt or some other elevated standard here.
So in layman's terms, Ms. Asta is required under 21-2-229 subsection C to demonstrate all evidence to substantiate the challenge, correct?
Correct, yes.
I just want to put it in layman's terms.
Right,
Okay.
and the basic, she's enunciated in writing her challenge that they are, or allegation is that they are no longer residents of Georgia, and so they are not qualified. And it's her job to present the facts that support that allegation.
Okay, excellent. We'll go ahead and open it up for any questions. Go ahead, Mr. Bruni.
Ms. Asta, the addresses for these voters,
Oh, you're Mike.
I'm sorry, the addresses for these voters in Alabama, where do those addresses come from?
From the national change of address,
From the change of address?
Yeah.
Are those same addresses on their voter registration
Yes.
in Alabama?
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And did you use, did you use any other backup on the addresses and so on?
No, we looked at the addresses, the change of addresses, and I went to the Alabama rolls first to see if they were registered in Alabama. And if they were, I made sure it was the same address as what was on there. And then I went to the Georgia to see if they're still registered in Georgia. And I made printed PDFs, saved PDFs of those two files.
Very good.
Do you have any personal knowledge of any of these voters, or, any, personal experience, or was this just sort of a hunt and find process?
No, it was
for
just
you?
hunt and find.
Okay. And Daniel?
Yes.
I do have a question of Mr. White, sorry. Per the NVRA, we are not, the national change of address is not sufficient proof, correct?
By itself, it is, I don't know that it would say, it's not sufficient proof for the board on its own to go through and remove people. But in a challenge hearing, the typical process is for a voter to bring that and bring whatever evidence they have, and the board can weigh that evidence and take into consideration that by itself, that may or may not be, or, sufficient evidence to remove somebody from the polls.
But it would be in direct violation of the NVRA to only take that one piece of knowledge, right, from the national change of address? I mean, it does specifically say that in Section 8.
Yes, that's speaking to, it's not speaking to this process, but it is speaking to the board taking action, or the registrar taking action on its own. But this is an evidence, this is a procedure where both parties ostensibly have notice, and so they're allowed to present their evidence, and you can weigh that evidence and say it doesn't, according to this, we're not supposed to do this on our own. just with this, so we're gonna weigh it this way or weigh it, without it, so.
Okay.
So we have a copy of the Alabama voter registration. Did you submit these?
I did.
Okay, good.
And Janine, did we try to make contact with each one of these people, which is,
Yes, each of these people were sent a letter to their Alabama address and their Georgia address. This may or may not be the right time, but just to let you know that 2 of the notices came back as change of address to the Alabama address. So these were sent to the Georgia address and did come back with the postal sticker.
Which 2 were those, just so we
Those
can-
were Kara Dawn Scott and Bobby Lee Smitherman.
and those 2 were from Georgia?
Those were sent to their Georgia address.
Okay.
Those are the only 2 that came back.
So those are the only notices, all notices were sent to what's noted on this form as the purported previous Georgia address. And as it relates to those 6 individuals, only 2 had those returned undeliverable. Those notices were returned to your office undeliverable.
We have return to sender on our, everything we send out. So they came back with a return to sender change of address from the Postal Service indicating their change of address to the Alabama address.
And just for clarity and for the record, that's Miss Kara Cowan Scott, also known as Kara Dawn Scott, and Mr. Bobby Lee Smitherman. Those are the 2 individuals.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And I just want to note, that's all we've received back. That's, that's as of today. The window has been significantly tightened on when these hearings have to be held. And I can, as a lawyer who sends out green card notices pretty regularly or just gets returned mail, we just need to make clear those are the only 2 as of today that we've received back. So there may be others that come later, but as of the date of this hearing, those 2 we have.
When were the notices sent out? I know Mr. White made mention of the 3-day notice period, but if you could give us the date certain as to when the notices were
They were,
issued?
yes, ma'am. They were sent out on the 9th, May 9th.
Hello, board members. This is Jessica Brooks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Jessica. Good to see you. Looks like she's frozen. I know she was traveling. Jessica, can you hear us? Let me just try to get her on the phone. Go ahead. I'm just going to let her know that she's frozen and she may just need to.
Well, while we're trying to straighten that out, just a question, did we send any notices to their Alabama addresses?
Yes, sir. We sent the same letter to both the Alabama address as indicated by the challenger and to the Georgia address.
And we hadn't received anything from Alabama, right?
Right. None of the respondents contacted me. They may or may not be on the line. I think when we call a roll to see if they have a response, we'll know if they're on the line.
Okay.
I just sent Ms. Brooks a message letting her know that we can't hear her. Oh, go right ahead. Yeah.
I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit about how you determined these 6 voters to challenge. Like, what was your process for coming up with them, and where did you, like, sort of what were your steps, and what was your process for this? How'd you go about this?
From the spreadsheet that I have is enormous. I mean, there's like 5,000 names on it, just in Cobb County.
And what is this spreadsheet?
It's the national change of address.
Okay, so you just have
Yes.
downloaded from a specific date and
Yes.
time. You have
Yes.
a national change of address
Yes.
spreadsheet, and you're just combing through that.
I just sorted them by state, and I started with Alabama. Just arbitrary. It was, starts with an A, we started with Alabama.
Okay.
And then of course, you have to have their birth date, so then I sorted it by, the people had put in a birth date. And then I just started at the top of the sort and just worked my way. Some of them don't have haven't registered in Alabama, so, they got, marked off. Some of them they've registered, but it's like they're checking their address. They're trying to verify their Alabama address before they're active. So they've registered, but they're not really active yet in Alabama. But if they had an active registration in Alabama, then I checked Georgia to see if they were also registered in Georgia.
Okay, so you're basically just taking that national change of address list, comparing it to various other addresses in other states, and looking for registration, sort of
Well,
drilling down.
I use vote.org, and it links to the Secretary of State's website.
If you could, Ms. Asta, you made mention of the fact that they are active, but they're not registered. If you could draw that distinction for me, because that's confusing me.
Well, it just says, if you look on the sheets, it says, on Alabama, it says active. And on some of them, it said address, I can't remember exactly what it said, but basically it was like they're checking their address
Active ones.
to make sure that their address is,
Okay.
But you only submitted active ones.
oh, yeah.
Right.
Hold on, let me call Ms. Brooks. For whatever reason, she said she was disconnected. Ms. Brooks?
Yes, I am. I hear you.
Okay, and we can hear you. President, Ms. Asta, were you able to hear Ms. Brooks?
Yes.
Okay, go right ahead.
I actually have two questions. One is, what are the registration dates for each one of the voters in both Alabama and Georgia? And as our chair just was asking for clarification about, what do we know about the voting? What do we know about the definitions in both Georgia and Alabama concerning active voters? And what do we know about any voting records on those voters?
And Alabama does not give you what their registration, when they did register. Georgia does, like Angela, she registered to vote in 10/29/2018. And
Was that
I couldn't hear
information
some of that.
provided?
I apologize.
No problem. I apologize for interrupting you. I just wanted to follow up on the question. Was that information provided, the dates of registration for the, for Georgia registration?
it's in this,
Okay.
in the forms for each person from Georgia.
Got it. Yep, I see it here.
But Alabama doesn't provide that information in this.
Okay. And I apologize, Jessica, if you could, or Ms. Brooks, if you could repeat your second question? Well, first, I'm sorry, have you received a sufficient response to your first question?
I believe that the information was provided. I guess I was wondering about back to the definition of active versus inactive in Georgia and the definition of active versus inactive in Alabama.
Well, on the Alabama website, if you look, I'm looking at Angela Bacon right now, but it says election details, and you see the 5/24/2022 primary election, and that if you push that drop-down box, it tells all the elections that are upcoming that I would assume that she is eligible to vote in. It did not give any past, that they did vote. It didn't give any past voting information, but it does give the primary and the general.
Okay. Did you have a question, Mr. Bruni?
I was just going to say, it might clarify that she's only submitted active status. The whole inactive is a moot point because she didn't.
We'll go back and check those later and see if their addresses get
Yeah, well, no, it was,
approved.
it became a point that was not mute because she made a reference to active registration versus active, and I personally was confused.
No, they weren't active. They weren't active. They weren't active. They were verifying. They were pending.
Okay.
Checking of the address.
They live in Alabama.
Yeah, in Alabama.
But that's none of these.
No.
No, I understand. I just pending, this is the first time I'm hearing the word
Well,
pending.
I would have to look at it, but it's
Restoration or
not,
stacked
it
registration.
wasn't really,
Understood.
okay.
Ms. Brooks, do you have any further questions?
I think I wanted our council to, or Janine, just to clarify for us how voters notify us that they no longer intend to vote in Cobb County or they have moved.
So the Georgia Code does say that when you move to another state, a voter is responsible for contacting the registration office and canceling their voter registration. Very few people do that.
Is there a time frame within which the Georgia Code requests or provides for providing that notice?
I don't believe so. It's 21-2-218.
I'm sorry, 218?
218, right. Any person who registered to vote in another state and who moves such person's residence from that state to this state shall, at the time of making application to register to vote in this state, provide such information as specified by the Secretary of State in order to notify such person's former voting jurisdiction of the person's application to register to vote in this state. And that's going from another state to Georgia. But the same applies when you're moving from another state, from this state to your new state. You're required to notify either your current state to notify your former state, which we do get some notifications that way from other states. But generally speaking, we have to wait until the voter notifies us, or the national change of address every other year process that the state runs, looking for matches. And so that's a larger effort that doesn't happen in these, smaller increments like what these challenges are.
Certainly. So to your point, it's not often, if I heard you correctly, it's not often that, say, if I relocate to Florida, I retire and relocate to Florida, it's incumbent upon me to advise the office or the state that I'm no longer voting here in the state of Georgia. In the absence of me doing that, how generally would the voter rolls be maintained?
Every other year, the Secretary of State's office runs a program matching the voter registration list against the national change of address list. So basically, almost the exact same process that Ms. Asta followed, but it's done in a mass project. And then those that match, that there's some work that we have to do to make sure it's the right people, but then they're made inactive. And then if they're inactive for 2 general elections, then they're deleted.
Okay.
It is a lengthy process.
Right. And you said the additional work that you have to do, because it is a lengthy process, it sounds as if it's more than just looking at list A from Georgia and list B from Alabama, purportedly finding a match and then deleting it.
Right, the voters are sent notices, just like what we did. We sent a letter, but it would be a small postcard type notice saying it appears that you are no longer qualified to be a registered voter in Georgia. Respond with this card in 40 days or you will be moved to inactive.
So the time frame within which they would, under law, be permitted to respond is within 40 days?
Right, only because there is a clock that is set on the record, and because again, it is a mass project, and so it doesn't require us to go back in, in a certain time frame. It is an automatic thing that's set at 40 days.
Okay. And then you indicated, one last question. Probably not the last question, but I will yield the floor to you, Mr. Garland. My question was, you said the Secretary of State undertakes this process every other year. Are you aware of when the process would be undertaken by the Secretary of State? Where are we in that every other year timeframe?
Well, it's on the non-election years, on the non-big cycles, so it would be the odd years.
Okay.
Yeah, they run that. They run the no contact, so no contact in 2 general elections. Those are removed. The folks that get the notice for the national change of address are only made inactive if they don't respond. And then again, if they remain inactive for 2 general elections, then they're deleted.
Okay. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, no, that's all right.
No, the floor is yours.
Sorry.
Sorry. But these, we can always put them back if we wanted to. If they said, oh, proved that they had, you know, hey, I was over in Alabama on a quick, special assignment.
Well, my understanding is this code 21-2-229 allows us to delete the voter if the voter,
This is
if
to
the
re-
board
Yeah, this is to
decides.
remove them, so they would,
Yeah.
they would have to re-register, to get back on.
We could,
But it would be not in time for, it would, I guess it would have time for
right,
the.
yeah, okay. But like that last case we
Yeah.
had, was it up in Nebraska or somewhere? They were up there for work assignments.
Alaska,
But they
yes.
were planning to come back, you know? But they voiced that they were on the phone. We have not heard a thing from these people.
We also just sent notices on the 9th, and today is the 18th,
Yeah.
with an intervening weekend. So,
I think I commend you on what you did here, and there was due diligence here on our part as well. I would like to make a motion that we remove them.
I don't
Time
know
out.
that
Wait,
we,
wait,
yeah,
wait.
we,
Okay,
that's
Time
not
out.
the
We got-
process here.
We gotta follow the whole process.
So we do have, but that's why we had Daniel explain what the process is. And I guess my only comment, and that's the reason why I asked Mr. White to refer again to section 229, subsection C. The burden of proof is not, as you made reference to, this person could, or any of these people could come back and quote, prove that they deserve to be on the voter registration log. The burden of proof is on Ms. Asta. And as Ms. Mosbacher made mention of, there are laws in place that indicate what we can use as evidence. So I think at this point, Daniel, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. Is there anything, so we're gonna probably move here from the challenger's case, you're presenting evidence. If you have anything else, now's the time to sort of put that evidence on. Otherwise, we'll ask if anybody is here in response to the challenge.
No, I have no other evidence.
Okay, all right. You can step down for now.
Again, thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
So at this time, I would ask if any of the voters or anyone that is here on their behalf, and I'll just call them by name and give each individual or their representative a chance to respond. Is there anyone here to respond to the challenge of Angela Bland Bacon? Is there anyone here to respond to the challenge to the qualifications of Clara Josephine Thornton? Is there anyone here to the challenge of the qualifications of Charlotte Bates Pollinger? Is anyone here to respond to the challenge to Kara Cowan Scott? Is there anyone here to respond to the challenge of Bobby Lee Smitherman? Or is anyone here to respond to the challenge to the qualifications of Colleen Faye Adams? So if we don't have anybody that's here in response, they've been sent notice that's required under the statute. So they have been given the statutorily required notice. We're not necessarily allowed to, the notice is really just required for the hearing. And so we've sent the notice that's been required, and you've heard the evidence that the challenger has put up, and there's been no inherent response. So now is the time when you can ask staff if they've done any looking into this, if you want to, or you can proceed to deliberation.
Has staff looked into this?
I just would like to mention that I did use the same tool, I think that Ms. Asta used for Alabama's voter registration system, and I checked all of the voters. I actually did find Ms. Angela Bacon. I thought earlier that I didn't have her, but they are all still on there as of today. And Mr. Smitherman has cast a ballot in the Alabama state primary as of May 16th.
Okay,
I think he's wanted to stay in Alabama.
thank you. Is there anything further on behalf of staff, you or your staff?
Just the only other thing is I did print for the board's reference the current registration report for each of these voters, and mostly just trying to bring out the fact that they have not voted in this primary, and most have not voted since the January 5th, 2021 election, the runoff for Senate. I think one of them hasn't voted since 2018 here in Georgia. Ms. Scott has not voted since 2018.
Thank you. I think at this time, it's appropriate for us to go into an executive session for the purposes of discussion.
That's fine. We need a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, and for purposes of potential litigation.
For purposes of potential litigation, that's correct.
All in favor?
Yes. Jessica, we've,
Yes.
a motion's been made to move into an executive session for purposes of litigation. Do you have a vote?
I do, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
Alrighty.
So it
So-
just, yeah,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say there will be an executive session where we can discuss legal issues. Because there is an appeal right involved in this, which could mean this could end up in court. So there's just we tend to, at these hearings, have a session where the board can talk with legal counsel about legal issues related to this and any appeal of it. And then any vote will be taken, a final vote obviously has to be taken on the floor, and the announcement, the rationale will be announced at that time. So if you want to, we do need the room to be cleared until executive session is, there's be a vote taken to come out of executive session, and we'll call you back in.
Thank you.
So I just want to make sure, we actually need to, I should have reminded you this, we need the vote to come out of executive session in open session. So if we could repeat the motion to come out of executive
Is
session.
there a motion to come out of executive
Make a
session?
motion to come out of executive.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to come out of executive session. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
The notice
Yes.
on the screen. It's unanimous. Thank you. Is there a motion with respect to? I was thinking I was projecting. Is there a motion with respect to any of the 6 voters that have been challenged? Yes, Steve?
I'd like to make a motion to remove Bobby Lee Smitherman from the Cobb County voter registration rolls because he has voted in Alabama this year.
Is there a second? Okay. Yeah, I'll second. It's been moved and properly seconded to remove Mr. Bobby Lee Smitherman from the voter rolls for Cobb County. All those in favor, if you will denote as much. And Jessica, your vote is?
Yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Well, I'd also like to make a motion to remove the other 3 off as well.
The other 3?
Or,
Other
excuse
5.
me, the other 5, because they've all lived in Alabama.
Is there a second?
I'll second for the purpose of discussion.
Okay. It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there discussion?
The reason I have hesitation is that because the time frame has been so short in terms of mail getting to the voters and reaction returned to us, I just don't think there has been enough time to really feel confident that we can remove those 5 voters. I think the evidence is pretty strong, but I just have a hesitation knowing the difficulties with the mail and knowing that people move to other locations all the time for temporary purposes, and yet they change their address so their mail gets forwarded while they're away. And we don't, if they had voted in Alabama,
Which they have.
one of them did, that definitely is evidence that they're no longer intent on being a Georgia voter. But we don't have that evidence from the other 5. So anyway, that's my comment.
Certainly.
I still, my point is, well, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay.
Pat will speak, Jessica, and then we'll come to you. Apologies.
Okay. My point is that, the point is they do live in Alabama. They've been certified that they live in Alabama. They have their addresses. And if they want to, if there's a challenge, they want to come back here, or they said, hey, we never moved, well, they can get back on the roll. There's not a problem. But what we're doing is, it seems like we're just, what do we have this meeting for? We're not taking them off because we're not sure. Well,
That was the purpose of the meeting,
Well,
to assess the information, hear from Ms. Asta, which we did, and assess the information. And I'm not completely in disagreement with you. I think, and it's probably a better path forward is to take them up individually, because all of the circumstances are not the exact same with each of the 5 of them. So, I'm sorry, Jessica, go ahead, please.
I was going to make 2 points, and one is what you mentioned, mentioned that it would be best for us to take these up individually. And the other major point that I want to make is that it's not up to us to try to reword the current law. The law is the law concerning the time frames. So we do understand the hardship that can impose on voters, but the law is the law. So with that, I'd just like to just make those 2 points.
Okay. Well, we do have a motion on the floor that's been moved and properly seconded. I don't know, Mr. Gartland, if you want to,
No, I don't want to retract.
you don't want to retract your motion? Okay, then we'll vote on the motion as presented.
Okay.
All of those in favor of voting to remove all 5 voters from the roll, if you'll indicate whether you are in favor of removing all 5, yes. If you are not, then vote no.
My vote is no.
Okay. So it's 3 to 2, no, we're not in favor of removing all 5. So at this point, I want to suggest, because again, I'm mindful of the hour and the fact that we only had this meeting room until 4 p.m. I want to take them up, I would like for us to take them up individually. Actually, we're done. I mean, you said
Yeah,
no,
right.
we're not in
Leave them
favor
right
of it, so,
now.
yeah, we're done, okay.
Yeah.
You better
That's it?
make a motion to close.
Oh, I was told I don't have to make an emotion
Oh,
to
you
close,
don't?
that I have the authority to just close the meeting when
No,
we're adjourned.
People tend to think you do, but the chair has the authority to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, well, with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you.